I remember driving to church in the middle of March thinking to myself, is this going to be okay? I had a call from an elder saying, we're going to meet this morning, but I'm not certain that we can meet any much after this. And I thought, yeah, this is pretty risky. I don't know if this is going to be okay. We went to church that morning. Very few people showed up. And we were all of a sudden having to kind of reevaluate everything. And one of the things that a lot of us preachers had to figure out back in March was, how do we talk about not meeting and let people know that they're really okay with God, even if they're not there physically present? And so a lot of us online, a lot of us ministers were having these conversations and talking about loving our neighbor and care and concern for the most vulnerable and things like that. And I still agree with all of that. So all of a sudden we had this messaging that said, you really don't have to be here to be a faithful member. You don't have to be at the building for this to really count. Staying at home is perfectly acceptable. Well, then all of a sudden we're looking at this going, well, I can not watch my preacher. I'll watch Don McLaughlin. I'll watch Rick Ashley. I'll watch Chris Seidman. I'll watch some other guy. But what's happened is people have learned that there's much to consume from their home. And I think that's really hard to come back from, honestly. But I think it can be leveraged for some really, really important good things that can then result in some amazing exponential kingdom growth. I was at a church conference a year or two ago, and I was in this massive church building. It must have cost $100 million to build this place. It was incredible. And we were learning simple, reproducible disciple making and church planting. And I was looking around going, well, I don't guess this is the model for simple and reproducible, right? Like buy 100 acres, get an architect, pay him $500,000, and then, you better pony up at least $50 million to get this thing started and then renovate. And then what's your power bill? It's probably, $100,000 a month. That's probably not even close. And I was saying, this is not reproducible. Like if we want quick and nimble, we want to be able to adjust. We want to be able to start new things and birth new things and watch the kingdom go into new communities. You can't just plop this monstrosity down on a new community. It's just not going to work that way. And I'm not condemning that approach. I'm just saying that all of a sudden, as people sat at home saying, well, if I'm okay to do church at home and not be at brick and mortar, then why are we giving in order to support brick and mortar? Why are we paying for buildings that sit empty 95% of the time and are only used by 5% of the week? Maybe are we okay with that? Is that good stewardship? These questions begin to show up. Or do we need to pay a preacher, $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 a year to preach when all these wealth of resources are all over the place? Now, when pandemic came, those who were not putting their sermons online began to put their sermons online. I mean, if you want to find a particular preacher or hear a particular series or topic, it's all there. We have more resources at our fingertips than scholarship the leading biblical scholars had 20 years ago. It's all there. It's all accessible. And we don't have to even do much digging to find it. It's just a wealth of resources. God has provided us homes where the power bills are already paid. He's provided us fantastic, phenomenal teaching from people who live someplace else and are already being paid to do that and to produce that. It all exists. You can just pipe that into your house. But we cannot just church and couch surf. We have to be around a community of people. And this is where it gets really, really important, where I think the pieces have to all come together. Like, what is the vision for church that comes out of all of this heartache and difficulty over the last 9 months? And it looks like another 9 months or so to come. And I think it's this. I think that we're finally going to break the barrier on the feasibility of house churches in the West. Now, what I was warned against with house churches from people who were in the know was that house churches don't have a sense of permanence. And people in the West love a sense of permanence. They like to go to brick and mortar. They like to be able to be there and feel like, okay, if I give my 10% or my 2% or 3%, is this still going to be here next year or 10 years from now? Whereas if I just come to your house, you might just pack up shop and say, we're just done not doing it anymore. And all that time and energy you invested are out the window. But what we've learned over the last 9 months is you can do church at your home and God is perfectly pleased with it. And you're already paying your power bill. Do we really need these massive church facilities and billions of dollars of property in order? Is that the best stewardship of God's resources for the advancement of the gospel? And we're not advancing the gospel. We build it and now they don't come. We've built it and they're not coming. Our own people are not coming, but they've been scattered and we need to engage them. And I'm not trying to pull you away from your church. I'm not trying to invite you away or anything like that. But here's the vision I think God is fleshing out here in front of us. It's like a hybrid church where you can bring in the most quality preaching and teaching that you could possibly imagine for a local community of believers in a small house church setting or a backyard church setting like what we're doing, to digest those things, to study them, to dig into the Word based on what they're hearing, and to grow in their knowledge, to grow in their learning, to grow in their faith together, and then still have community church life, still have Acts 2:42-47. If all you do is online church, you have no Acts 2:42-47. And if all you have is like community life, but there's no solid biblical teaching, then you're just going to be just led anywhere and just go off to Timbuktu and just shrivel up and die. So I think these two things are coming together at just the right time, where we have this amazing wealth of online resources where you don't have to have an amazing quality teacher within, the 5 or 6 or 7 families who are going to come to your house to worship. That's all taken care of. Someone else is paying their salary for you to enjoy and paying the live stream costs and the power bill to run all that straight to your home. So you can engage the very best teaching while also then engaging a community of faith that people may feel more comfortable coming to, because they're not going to go to a church building right now, but they may come into your backyard. They may come into, in a very small sense, a small amount of people sense, maybe your home. And so I think there's some amazing things bubbling up right now that God is going to leverage for the good of the kingdom. And I think that we need to be cognizant of these things. I think we need to cast that vision. Maybe you're an existing church and you're saying, well, we're always going to just keep this building or whatever. And, but how do we leverage this? Leverage your people at home. Get them to meet outside and sit in chairs and talk about the sermon, to talk about what's going on in their lives. If all we leave people with is just online church, they're not going to stick with it. We're going to lose a lot of our people, and churches that were already struggling are going to come back struggling even harder from this. But we can leverage this moment for kingdom growth. We truly can. God is on the move. God is doing amazing, incredible things, and He's doing it amongst His people. But if we're just stuck in a building paradigm, we're going to miss so much of what God is doing. So these are really, really important things. And from what I'm hearing from different people, different elders who I'm talking to, different ministers who I'm talking to, different people who have called me, texted me, emailed me, Facebook messaged me, is that God is moving. God is doing incredible things, and we need to participate with Him and where He's moving and when He's moving and how He's moving. And it's not going to be in a church building. And guess what? In the book of Acts, there's not a single inch of kingdom movement that took place in a church building in the book of Acts. Zero. Didn't happen for 150, 200 years, right? And so when did the church grow exponentially? It grew exponentially when they were meeting in their homes. You know why that is, I think? Well, they were recognizing the work of the Spirit, and the Holy Spirit was empowering them, certainly. When you meet with 500 people, when you meet with 200 people, when you meet with 75 to 100 people, you just can't use your gifts. You cannot fully invest and involve yourself in that kind of community on a regular basis. And so each week you got an opening prayer and a closing prayer and communion and servers and a preacher and this and that, the welcome person, but only so many people can do that. But when things get small and when things get intimate and everybody's participating, that's when the real growth happens. When people invest themselves and involve themselves on a regular basis, then it becomes theirs. They get a sense of ownership and belonging that goes far beyond. See, part of what's happened is we have got people to buy in, to attend based sheerly on intellectual assent. Like, I agree with these positions, therefore I attend. But what that lacks is a sense of belonging. What that lacks is a sense of mission. What that lacks is a sense of purpose, of investment and involvement on a weekly basis in the community of faith. Once we embody that, once we embrace that, once people experience that, they're going to feel more safe to invite their friends than they ever felt safe to invite their friends to the big church. And then I think we're going to start seeing some real kingdom growth. We're going to have to really equip people to make disciples. We're going to have to equip people to really plant house churches. And now all of a sudden, that big barrier of needing a sense of permanence for people to want to dive in, it's all been wiped away. It's been stripped out. People just are not seeing that anymore because they don't want to go to a room full of 300 people or 1,000 or 5,000 people because of the sickness that's going around. So I think God is working some amazingly powerful ways, and I'm just incredibly excited about it. And we need more people dreaming. We need more people envisioning this. And here's an amazing thing. You can look at this from one of two perspectives. Our churches are losing preachers like crazy. Now, if you're bought into the big box, you say that's bad. If you're bought into organic, then what you're saying is, Well, God has already sent people to seminary, given them 3 to 20 years of ministry experience, and now what are they doing? They're leaving to sell insurance or something like that. Why not leave to start a movement? Why not leave that to start something fresh, something new, something beautiful that God is calling you to? Now, don't just run out and do that. Pray about it, fast about it. Try to discern if that's what God is calling you to do. But what I'm telling you is, see, when I started into this with Backyard Church, I thought, how much training am I was excited. I'm like, I'm going to get to train people to do these things. And now what I found is God is sending us trained people. And that's the coolest thing, because God has already provided the training. God has already provided the experience and the education. It's all out there. It just needs to be leveraged for maximum kingdom growth. And we have all these people who've been so frustrated with the way things have been. They've just had to walk away. But walk away to what? We'll walk away to a new, real kind of kingdom growth. God has prepared us for this. This is the generation that turns the tide. This is the generation that changes the paradigm, that shakes things up. Back to pre-church building church. When church was growing exponentially, they were not calcified. They were not localized to a set-aside building, but they were meeting in homes. They were meeting in each other's homes. That gives someone the opportunity to participate in hospitality. You see, when you make a second space or third space, whatever you call that, called a church building, you in a sense are taking away the sense of hospitality and involvement, because nobody really owns that space. You even hire a custodian to tidy those things up. When you meet in a home or you meet in a backyard, you then have people who are then willing and able to volunteer their space. And that invests them and involves them in the process. And don't you know that their neighbors are more likely to come when you meet over in their neighborhood or over in their home or in their backyard, where they would have never come to that person's church? I'm just telling you, the opportunities are limitless. They are right in our face. God is shouting and screaming at us. And some of us are just going to kick and scream to our grave with a $50 million facility that just sat there empty 95% of the time. Can we feel good about that? But there's a vision for church that we can embrace. And it really may take some churches ending well. It may take some churches saying, we're not going to die. We're going to sell this stuff, and we're going to just launch this out into amazing kingdom resources and invest this into the lives of our community to make an impact. There may be churches that sell their church building and then go build a community center somewhere so that it's used 95% of the week, right, by the community, and then 5% by the church, rather than 5% by the church and then the other 95% empty, reserved for the church. Huge difference, major paradigm shift. These things are happening. They're not just coming, they're here. Let's participate. Let's get involved. I'm calling you to it. It's a call to action. Call you to action. Oh, please subscribe, hit thumbs up, all this. Who cares? This is kingdom growth, kingdom action, kingdom movement, real Holy Spirit stuff. And we get a front row seat, and you can too. It's time to dive in. Please be praying that God would move. No, he's moving. Pray that we would catch his movement. Pray that we would catch his movement, that we would get on board, we would ride that wave, and that God would use us for his glory and for the reaching of the lost, to make disciples of the nations, to be the faithful kind of people that he's always called us to be. Great days are ahead. I'm incredibly encouraged. I hope you are too. God bless you. Thanks for watching this. Pass it on to a friend. Subscribe if it's helpful. And if it's not, don't. But we'll see you next time. Love you.